So the goal isn't actually to be comfortable, it's actually to get uncomfortable, but in pursuit of things that are meaningful, right? Pain's gonna be part of life anyways. How do we make it meaningful, right? How do we do things in service of, moving us towards who we wanna be? And I'll tell that to clients, like my job is not for you to feel happy and good all the time. It's to encourage you to actually be uncomfortable at times, again, in pursuit of things that are meaningful to you.
Every day, we are blessed to interact with some of Colorado's most interesting people. On this podcast, Judaism with Altitude, we share their fascinating stories with you, and
we have a great time.
And welcome back to Judaism with Altitude. It's been a very great week since the last episode, and we thank you all for joining in today with us. Please, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please subscribe and like and share with friends. And thank you for being with us.
Today, we have a wonderful guest, Eshley Spitzer. She is one of my favorite people to talk to. We do have a lot in common. I guess I like to talk to people I also don't have stuff in common with. But Eshley and I seem to connect about a lot of things, like podcasts, for example. So this was very natural. So Eshley is a licensed professional counselor. And her days are therapy sessions with different clients of all ages, adolescents, adults, with trauma, grief, anxiety, depression, all the happy things. That's what Eshley is seeing all day long and helping people with. And we connect a lot over shared podcasts that we like to listen to, and we have great conversations. And we often say in our conversations, we should make this into a podcast, and now we're finally doing it. So I'm so excited for this again.
What are some of your shared podcasts that you share with each other that you enjoy?
Actually,
we have a lot.
Yeah.
We were just talking about one where I still don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. We're gonna go with Gedalia.
Yeah, I think Gedalia.
Gedalia Fenster, which is a really awesome one. I love the manifestation one.
Yes, I forgot we shared that one too.
Yeah. Ayelet Polanski. Okay,
yeah.
There we go. Well, I'm a big Esther Perel fan. We love.
And now I am also.
And now you are also. Also, Sarah's one of my favorite people to talk to. Also, shared. And the School of Greatness. I feel like we're always finding people and experts that we like. And
the School of Greatness is the one that interviewed the guy. What's his name?
Joe Dispenza.
Joe Dispenza. For those
love him too.
Who have never heard of this, you should go as soon as you're done with our podcast, which is probably a lot more interesting than that one.
And shorter.
But when you're done with this episode, go listen to that one. School of Greatness with Joe Dispenza.
There's a few.
This guy blew my mind. I was brand new, first time listener. This guy, through your brain, you can overcome paralysis, cancer, crazy things. And he has these week-long seminars, and he teaches people to do stuff with their brains that lets them heal themselves. It's unbelievable. It's hard to even fathom. So
the way you're talking about it just makes I listened to it and I loved it so much. And at one point I looked at our text messages back and forth, and it was literally I just sent you podcast after podcast after podcast. I was like, does he even ever listen to them? I hope so. I want to connect over them. And I like the fact that you listened and you enjoyed that. It's just
I think 90% of our conversations start with you telling me, I heard on podcast this morning.
Or
90% of ours too, although you guys have more conversations than us. But
totally. Right.
Yeah.
Or it's a random fact and you're like, oh, you just heard that in a podcast. Yeah. It's great. So I'm so happy to be here with Eshley, and I'm excited to hear all the questions really I've always wanted to ask you. We get to
fun.
Dig in, because there's always things when we talk that are more relevant in the moment, Mm-hmm. And so now we can kind of take a step back and get a bigger picture.
Maybe for those of us who don't know Eshley, if you wouldn't mind just giving a brief bio of where you're from and just kind of catch us up to where you're up to now, and then maybe we can get into some of these fun therapist questions.
Thank you for that random thing.
Yeah, there we go. I'm Eshley. I'm 32 years old. I'm holding on to that for another few weeks. From Denver, back in Denver. Yeah, I work as a therapist, and I've always loved to combine therapy with Jewish learnings, and like was a Jewish educator for that was such a big part of my adolescence and growing up, and like involvement in college. And so now being able to be involved with Olami, it just, the two really go hand in hand, and kind of like spiritual and personal development. And so kind of it's always fun for me to overlap my passions, and those are definitely two that go hand in hand. Let's see, yeah, from here, living here, have a dog, Archie. Went to Ramah with Rabbi Wolf way back in the day.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. Oh yeah.
We won the state championship last year. So
okay, there we go.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm excited to be here and share more. It'll come with what I do with work, I guess.
Beautiful. Can I ask, you're from here and you came back here. I feel like that's always a question. Like, what'd you do in between?
I went to college, then I came back actually for graduate school. And then I went to Chicago for a good amount of time. Just wanted something different and to test out like a bigger city, big Jewish community. It's really fun to be involved in a huge Jewish community out there, and get to know like Jewish history out there as well, and start my career out there. And then around time of COVID, I really missed nature and the mountains and being closer to family, and it brought me back here. But I think I was away for about 10 years, and yeah, it's good to come back and really long for the mountains.
I feel like a lot of people came back after COVID. Like COVID hit, and a lot of people kind of made their way back home.
Yeah, being in a city during COVID is hard, and kind of coming and having some more space and air made it a lot more manageable. So,
sure.
Yeah.
We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dig in. What are some of the common issues that you see in your therapy?
Really, people come in for like all sorts of things. A lot of times it's anxiety, depression. A lot of times it's like an emotion that feels kind of stuck, and people are really struggling to integrate it and just like want to get rid of that thing. It's like wanting to get rid of anxiety, wanting to get rid of sadness, wanting to get rid of something that they're having difficulty with and that's starting to create impairment in their life. And that's an interesting part of the work, is moving away from like, instead of how do we get rid of this, because we need those things. Sadness teaches us a lot, anxiety teaches us a lot. How do we just change your relationship to it, like how you relate to it and how you respond to it, as opposed to getting rid of it. But what brings people in is always different, things that have kind of exacerbated those difficult emotions, and just kind of having difficulty with managing them and navigating things outside of our control. So yeah, all sorts of things. The story is always different, but it's cool how it's similar in how we're all like emotional beings, I guess.
Have you noticed over the last 10 years doing this, have things intensified maybe since COVID, or, at least in the Jewish community in the last year? I feel like the world is very quickly changing. Have you noticed differences from when you began until now?
Yes and no. There's definitely times like this past year, there's just been so much grief and tension and anxiety for the Jewish community, for those of us who have a connection to Israel. So I think that kind of brings more people in who are looking for support. But, with the political climate, like I feel like since I've started, there's always something, right? There's always kind of like a flow of difficult events, and kind of what brings people in for support and how to navigate a lot of these things outside of our control, or that bring up emotional pain. This past year, obviously with what's gone on, it's felt like more, and I guess also having gone to Israel this past year, like in March, that was a significant way to be involved with grief and trauma work, that it was definitely different than what I've experienced before. And at the same time, like the emotions are the same. It's So yeah, both.
And so on your recent trip to Israel, were you using your professional skills to help there in that way? Were you helping people deal with what they've been through there, or wasn't that kind of trip for
Ish. Like, you can't really do trauma work, full trauma work until you're outside of the traumatic event is no longer happening. So like, how do we do that in Israel right now when it's really more about like basic coping skills and how do we regulate just in the here and now. And so that sort of stuff would come up, but I didn't have enough time there to like really get in the depth of something like the trauma and grief work that I do here. But the skills come with you everywhere. And so just kind of being a space for people to process, that was something that I got so much out of the trip. And I think was really offering a service to others. It's just like a listening ear where I'm not scared of uncomfortable emotions. So just being able to like hear it and sit with it and make space for it. And I don't know if you experienced this too, but when I was there, people were just like so grateful. Like they're like, why are you here? I'd be like, well, because it's me. That's me. That could have been me taken from the Nova Festival. Like this is me. And they were like so moved, which was surprising to me. And like, it's us. We're the same people. And so I was almost surprised by like how appreciative they were of us being there and like wanting to show up, wanting to go to Har Herzl and visit graves, like wanting to talk to people and hear their story. And just people were so needing like a space to talk and have their story be heard. And, I think in the day-to-day for Israelis, like there's not much room for that because they're just trying to help everyone else get by. But so that, I guess, part of my job of just holding space for people. While it wasn't like maybe more of the intense trauma or grief work was definitely something I could offer that I think gave both ways. And I'm sure you felt some of that too. Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
One of the things you said, like so much you touched upon already, this idea that we don't change our circumstances and our circumstances are, right, just one piece of it. So much of the puzzle is how we react to it. And I just so can appreciate and relate to that want of like to just rid of the feeling. Right? I was feeling tired today. I'm like, why am I tired? I don't want to be tired. I just want to get rid of it. And I couldn't. Eventually I'm just like, I have to take a nap and deal with it.
Yeah.
But like processing emotions and how to take a life that's just so relevant in everyday life for so many people that, life happens, whether it's something little, a glass breaks, or, it's something bigger, or it's something in the macro, in the world, and politics, and like having the skills to know how to navigate that.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, like what do we do in therapy? It's not so easy to answer, but it really does come down to like cognitive flexibility. So shifting your relationship with thoughts, which includes becoming more aware. And Judaism plays a huge role in that. Of who am I? I'm not my thoughts. I'm the soul that's observing the experience. There's the cognitive flexibility in being able to observe thoughts but not see them as ourselves. I think Rabbi Bernat said something like thoughts are like clothes. You can, take them on, take them off, but they're not who we are. So the flexibility in how we relate to our thinking, and then distress tolerance, which is all about like tolerating discomfort. How do we sit in discomfort and not just constantly be so focused on pushing it away? Because that's what we do and we've got used to. And it's the Carl Jung quote of what you resist will persist. Right. So how do you make space for those uncomfortable things and tolerate that discomfort, knowing that also growth has to be uncomfortable. There's no way to grow without discomfort. So how do we move away from just focusing on trying to get rid of pain, rid of discomfort, rid of sadness, and instead integrate it in a way that it's no longer seizing us or keeping us from being able to move. that make sense?
Yeah.
So those two things, I spoke about them a lot, about the cognitive flexibility and the distress tolerance. Like that's really the function of what we're doing in the therapy space, along with just someone to kind of like witness and process alongside you.
Can you repeat those terms? You said was it
Cognitive flexibility.
So that means, again, that means not to try to get rid of the anxiety, but to be flexible with the anxiety, or what does that mean exactly?
The distress tolerance is more of like, how do I tolerate discomfort? So not get rid of the anxiety, but how do I shift my relationship with it?
Okay.
Cognitive flexibility is more about, it's similar to psychological flexibility, but kind of observing that, emotions, thoughts, they come and go. They're always shifting. So instead of getting so stuck in them and fusing with them and like identifying so closely with them, how do we step into that, the awareness, the witness of that, which is our soul.
I'm feeling very stressed now, but not to necessarily get in a terrible rabbit hole with that.
Exactly.
You're just observing. You're not judging. You're
exactly.
Observing.
Because the more you judge it, the more you fuse with it, right? So that's the more it's like you get caught in this trap. And then the more you try to get rid of it, it's like it blinds you, like with this metaphor in ACT therapy. I don't know. It's like if there's a book, let's say I'm holding up a book and like, this is anxiety. The more I try to get rid of it, like now it becomes my focus. And so if I'm like just so focused on getting rid of it, like I can't see you anymore. I can't, my hands are busy. Like I'm not able to interact with my environment or do the things I care about. And the other alternative is pushing the book away, and that's avoidance. And that's also, people forget how much work avoidance takes. It takes consistent energy to just push something away. And this is sustainable for a few minutes, but if I were holding a book, like after a couple minutes, I just worked out, so it already will hurt to keep my arms up, but like it's going to start to hurt and really take a toll on you. And so then the book's going to kind of come back and hit you in the face. And so the goal is not to just constantly be trying to get rid of those difficult experiences or avoid them, but how do we make space for them? How do we allow it to be there and then still turn towards kind of actions, areas where we have control that are valuable to us, but without getting rid of the emotion or like fusing with it so much, the focus of our life. And that's the distress tolerance. It's the acceptance too, of like allowing it to be there without just our sole focus becoming trying to get rid of it and being happy. The more you focus on that, the more you realize you're not happy or that the pain is there. So not allowing it to take control and like observing the thoughts, observing the emotions, but knowing that they come and go. They're not this permanent thing that we're going to identify with forever. There's that impermanence there that helps us with the acceptance of it.
Well, yeah, as you're talking, it reminds me a little some research I did on this a couple of years ago. I was just curious on the topic, and one thing that you said just a few minutes ago I thought was interesting is this idea of not getting rid of the thing that's bothering us. So let's say it's anxiety. Well, anxiety is healthy, as you said,
right?
A certain degree. Like if I'm in the safari and there's lions approaching me, like I should be anxious. I should be nervous. Like That's good. That's how God made us. It's just if I, so that could be taken too far if there's not a danger, but I feel a danger, and then but that feeling of anxiety can be a healthy thing. And so I think probably with like the experience of like pain, like God forbid if someone doesn't feel pain, like they're not really healthy.
Right.
Like you have to be able to experience pain. So I thought that was interesting. And then one other metaphor I heard just about this idea of like, let's say someone is feeling very panicky or very, very anxious. It's almost like there's like a huge wave coming at them. Mm-hmm. So there are choices they could try to resist it with everything and just swim against it when they'll be completely depleted. Or they could kind of just like, just go under the wave and come back up. And then, the wave's going to come still, but you're going to be in a better place.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. We use that metaphor a lot of like riding the wave. Whether if you're surfing, you want to ride the wave. The more you fight the wave, the more energy it's taking.
Snaps out of you.
Same with panic. Like thing I always say is acceptance is kryptonite. Meaning like, if right now I said to you, like, I'll give you $1 million to panic, let's say maybe even just 1,000, since we know I don't have 1 million, you wouldn't be able to do it, because the second that you're open to that experience and there's no resistance, it's impossible.
I can't feel.
Right. So it's whether it's the wave or quicksand is the other metaphor, right? Of like, the more you fight it, the more it seizes you and tightens around you. So that resistance is really what adds to suffering. And so how do we make space for it? And yes, acknowledge that it is there to help us. Like, emotions are signs of life. Like you said, pain is a sign of life. I have anxiety, and I remember there was this podcast I heard where this woman was speaking where her amygdala, which is the part of your brain that processes fear, was calcified. So she couldn't feel anxiety. Being like, really, like a car could be coming towards her and there's no fight or flight response. And I just remember hearing that and being like, I'm so grateful for my anxiety. Like, it is there. It is a survival response. And yes, it does misfire. Yet our goal is not to get rid of it. It's how can we respond to it and observe it, so we can see it as like it's letting us know there's a perceived threat. Kind of take inventory, see, is there a perceived threat? What is this letting me know? And integrate it, as opposed to getting so freaked out by that sign of life or feeling like we must get rid of it. It's there to give us information. And that's really what all emotions are. And that you can't have one without the other. Like, there's no pleasure without pain. That makes me think of like Inside Out, but right, like there's no sadness without joy, and vice versa. So kind of welcoming them all, and not that's where the, I guess, distress tolerance comes in. Being able to tolerate that discomfort, knowing that it has a function.
That's fascinating. What are some of the modalities? You mentioned ACT.
Mm-hmm.
What are like some of the other modalities, and like how do you use them to help a person with these skills?
There's a lot. There's so much overlap. I think it's similar with like a lot of religions. There's like universal messages and just different like facets of how to express them. So the models and theories are kind of like that. I use a lot of ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. And we call it ACT because it's all about, so like back up, it acknowledges pain is part of life. Right? So discomfort is part of life. Suffering is pain plus non-acceptance. Right? So it's that resistance is what creates suffering. So how do we acknowledge that pain is part of life, make space for it, and still move towards what's valuable? So it has a huge emphasis on values work, like identifying what is valuable to you, who's the person that you want to be, and empowering you, and just taking small steps towards those values, towards the kind of person that you want to be, which religion also serves as kind of giving us that value template. So ACT is one that comes in a lot. And what I love about it, it was like created for people partially for a lot of different things, but also people with chronic pain. So this idea of how do I live alongside pain and still find value and meaning in my life? I use a lot of DBT as well, and that's dialectic behavioral therapy. And a dialectic is, I think, something we talk about a lot. Is, two seemingly opposing things not only can coexist, but they do. So to not get so stuck in the, good and bad, the yes, the no, the kind of the answer is in the middle. And DBT is all about acceptance and change. While they seem like opposites, you actually need one for the other, right? We have to accept where we're at in order to have change. We have to change our outlook in order to move towards acceptance. And it has a lot of different skills within it.
That sounds like the book on Wednesday night that
yes.
we've been talking about.
Exactly.
How cool.
Yeah. And so it all overlaps, right? It's like it kind of this integration. Yeah, it comes up a lot in our learning.
What book? What learning is this?
Do you want to say?
It's Rabbi Shlomo Buxbaum's book, The Four Elements. Is that right?
4 Elements and Inner Freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of our Wednesday night women's Olami learning program.
Shout out.
Great program. It's the best. We love Wednesday night learning. Yeah, we were getting stuck on like basically the Yetzer Hara is kind of like seeing it as a bad.
This bad inclination within us.
It's bad inclination. And so kind of getting stuck and like, but it's evil. And then there's the Yetzer Tov and like, but if it's evil, how could it possibly have a function? And the book was explaining that it absolutely does have a function. We need the Yetzer Hara it was kind of like keeping us grounded in some of our more physical needs, and aware of different physical needs and kind of having that balance. And so we were having to do some work to move away from getting so stuck in the like, but it's bad, but it's good. And like kind of seeing that there's a function and still a function in it. And someone, a friend of mine was telling me this, I think it's, so Rabbi Nachman said that like the Yetzer Hara shouldn't be termed like evil, but instead it's like the imagination. It's not necessarily this evil inclination, but it's our imagination, and it serves a function. When we see it as evil, we really push it away in a way that can lead to resistance and avoidance.
And then we just think we have to follow the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, which is not like we're meant to have these inner struggles and choices. Right. It's meant to be difficult. That's right. Why we're here, is to make those choices.
Right.
So if we expect ourselves just to move away from bad and only go towards the good, then like it's not even real expectations. We're gonna fail sometimes. So if we reframe it, I love how you said that, as like not evil, but it's these two important opposing forces.
Right.
It just, I don't know, helps create balance.
Balance that is the center.
Yeah.
There's a passage in the Talmud in Tractate Sukkah where it describes at the end of days, like in the Messianic era, there will be a eulogy, intense eulogy given. And one of the opinions is that the eulogy will be over the destruction of the Yetzer Hara, the slaughtering of the evil inclination. The obvious question is, what's so bad about that? Well, what would be so bad if I didn't have desires to go do things I shouldn't do? That would probably be a good thing. And the Talmud says that both the righteous and the not so righteous will be crying. The righteous will cry because they're going to ask, where's this incredible peak that I used to be able to conquer and climb? It's not there anymore. Now I can't get to those heights.
No more mountains.
No more mountains. It's hard for us in Colorado to imagine. And then the more wicked of them will have the clarity that their Yetzer Haras, ironically, were a little bit less. And if they tried a little harder, they could have done it. Now they can't do it anymore. And so they'll be crying. So it brings out the point that that resistance, that Yetzer Hara serves a great purpose to enable us to achieve greatness, and without which we're not, of course would be great, but what's the big deal about that? It's not like a big deal. So, remind me of that.
That's great.
I love that. Yeah, it's like, what would we be proud of if there was no struggle and there's nothing to feel fulfilled?
Right. You go to the gym. You said you went to the gym. I go lift, 20-pound dumbbells, like, what's the big deal? It's like nothing. It's like, see, of course, it's nothing. I'm joking.
It's still a lot.
That's a lot for me. I don't go to the gym much. That was a total obnoxious joke. Then I go and lift like 1 pound. Like, even for me, I'm not that strong. But that's not how I get bigger. Of course I can do that. So you need that resistance. And certainly mentioned Rabbi Nachman, I feel like he had his all over Breslov thought and Hasidic thought, this idea of specifically when you're in like this low place, that you have the ability to climb and to reach higher, and sometimes specifically because you're in that place, enables you to reach even higher and reach higher levels.
Yeah.
That one podcast, the Gedalia Fenster podcast that we share now, and we listen to, like oftentimes it's all his recorded classes, but oftentimes it's his class that's literally like he's taking from Rabbi Nachman.
Yeah, that's a lot. You was talking about that, like when you are falling, that's the time to lean into faith, which is resilience, and just holding on, knowing that it's impermanent. Right? Like that difficult emotion, that difficult moment, it's not going to last forever. But how do we lean into faith, which is what builds our resilience in that, and is also what then allows us to appreciate when we're in that higher place, when we're feeling better, which is then when it's like give twice as much, I think is what he was saying. Like do twice as much when you can, knowing that when we're in the low place, it's shifting, and when we're in the high place, it's shifting. And I think that law of impermanence is like such an anchor for me in therapy, it's, no matter what, if it's a hard session, it's a hard moment, it's like things are constantly shifting and changing. And, faith, that resilience is what helps us move through that, knowing, okay, I've either felt this way before, I've had difficult emotion before, I've had a difficult time before. It's not going to last forever. And it also is giving me an appreciation for the other side.
And to your point about faith, in these moments, I saw maybe 2 weeks ago in the Parsha, the Slonimer Rebbe, the Nesiv Shalom, describes how when a person is specifically at their lowest place, like you have to remember that they are what we call a chelik elokai mimal. That you alluded to this before, but our soul is divine and it comes from God. So we literally have God within us. We literally have that godly spark within us. And to think that we can't overcome is blasphemous. Because if we have godliness within us, then we certainly can overcome any obstacle we're in or any rut we're in. So we have to have that belief in ourselves as low as we are. And then we can really climb out of that and ascend even higher.
Yeah. I use that a lot. The Telek Elohim is that to me is like our consciousness, right? That's the observer, it's the soul. So it's the part of us that can witness what's happening in the present moment or what's happened in the past and those experiences that come and go, but we're the vessel for all of that. And when we acknowledge like that is God, right? Think of that as also our intuition. It's that observer, that witness that is connected to God and a greater source. That teaches us a lot about compassion and forgiveness and kind of separating from shame. It is such a helpful anchor to know that is within us as well. It's not just an external thing.
Love it. And that's like Joe Dispenza's this whole thing. Oh. Like that. That
you have the power within you.
Yeah.
And we do. Yeah.
Are there any other modalities that you wanted to kind of like head into it? I just want to give you a chance.
Gosh, there's so many. I'm a skills and psych nerd, very proudly, but I've been doing more like somatic work, which is kind of bringing the body into the healing, especially with trauma work. So how are we using our body? And that's a lot of like book The Body Keeps the Score, like Bessel van Kirk's work in just how do we use mind and body to integrate experiences and heal, since so much is stored in our body. And it's amazing how effective that's been, since I think we are so intellectual and we try to rationalize through so many things, but sometimes it's really need to step out of thought and focus on how do we kind of integrate this in our body and heal our nervous system. So that's been a big focus recently, is moving away from just the thinking and logical piece and tapping more into some of the somatic stuff.
That's so fun.
Yeah. And definitely eclectic work. Like stuff comes in from Judaism and our Wednesday night learnings all the time. It comes in from all sorts of books. Going back to like some of the founders' psychology, like I love Adler and Jung, and like there's a lot of overlap in the theories and how they show up, and it's just kind of how do you state the message and portray it in a way that speaks to whoever's in front of you.
Thankful. Yeah. Are there any? I don't know if this is a fair question, but I want to get to the root of it. Are there any tendencies or habits or that you see as like an underlying cause that cause all these other issues that bring people in? Like if we could stay away from something, or one dangerous habit or way of thinking, like do you see any patterns in it?
Yeah. I think it's what we've spoken about. It's the two things that come to mind: is the resistance. Just like it never ceases to amaze me how much we try to resist discomfort and how uncomfortable we are with discomfort. That's part of what I love about grief work, is like there's nothing to fix. It's just to bear witness to what's showing up and sit alongside of it. We get so uncomfortable with discomfort. I'm just trying to get rid of it, that if we were to kind of see it as, like we've said, like a sign of life, and bringing something in, and be curious about it, and not be so focused on fighting it, then we don't have to be so closely fused with it. I think, when we realize like everything we're doing in every moment is like to feel okay. I forget who said that, but I remember that from graduate school. It's like every single action, whether it's me, tucking my hair behind my ear, moving in my seat, or yelling at someone, is to feel more regulated. Like we're constantly trying to get back to this place of regulation and homeostasis, and just to pay attention sometimes to how much we're focusing on feeling okay and being okay. If we can kind of lessen some of the focus on getting rid of discomfort, there's actually a lot to learn in the discomfort. There's a lot of expansion that it can bring. So that's a big one, is how to just tolerating distress. Even think in this political climate, like to have a conversation with someone that disagrees with you without feeling like you're going to lose your mind, to be able to listen to that and be uncomfortable without just feeling like you can't tolerate it anymore. It's a huge disservice for us to not be able to tolerate discomfort. The other is moving away from the black and white. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you have any theories as to why people seem so resistant to discomfort. I was even reflecting when I was in high school. I'm a drop older than you. You're probably just a young fifth grader or whatever it was. But when I was like a senior in high school, my best friend, one of my best friends, him and I vehemently disagreed on politics, and it didn't matter. And I feel like now that's a lot more rare, and I wonder psychologically why. Like what changed in a whole bunch of years?
Yeah.
In 20 years, 15 years, whatever it is.
Yeah. Esther Perel was recently talking about this. It's like you used to go out in the street and like play with your neighbors, right? And there's this group of eclectic people. Yeah. And so you were surrounded by differences. And over time, we've just become more comfortable. Technology is definitely supported with that too, right? Like I can just get a meal delivered to my house. I don't even have to get out. I don't have to leave my home. I don't have to interact with people if I don't want to. So there's less interaction with difference. And we're no longer going into the street and playing pickup basketball with people surrounding us. And we really stick to those that are similar to us out of comfort. Yeah. And I think why does it scare us so much? It steals our certainty, perception of certainty, right? Like if you make me think about something differently, you're going to tell me I'm wrong. It's like, well, then what is right? And it just shakes the ground that we stand on in a way. It makes us really uncomfortable to not have that perception of certainty. It reminds me that there's Kabbalah Haggadah I was looking at this year, and it was like knowledge is synonymous with confusion. And like at first I was like, huh? And then it was like, that makes so much sense. Like the more you know, the more confused you are. And the more it kind of shakes the ground underneath you. And we don't like that. We don't like feeling uncertain. So when you're faced with someone who's different than you and you have to tolerate uncertainty, if you're so used to not doing that and you've gotten really comfortable in just being kind of around people that think the way that you do and feel the way that you do, that haven't kind of pushed you to feel discomfort, it's very untethering. And unfortunately, I think our life way of living right now, and kind of all of the news that we get and kind of observing all the conflict, like we really are so scared to let go of any perception of certainty.
Well, as you're talking, kind of having these light bulbs go off in my head. The pursuit of comfort and the fear or phobia of discomfort. And at first glance, it's interesting. At first glance, we think that the pursuit of comfort is a beautiful idea, maybe a Jewish idea, but I'm pretty sure it's not. I'm pretty sure the pursuit of comfort is not a Jewish idea. Comfort in my life would be waking up in the morning and going outside, maybe have a coffee, lay in a hammock. I'd be very comfortable. but that's not life. That's not growth. That's not what I'm here to do. We believe in Judaism, I'm not here to be comfortable. That's not the function of this world. This world, the olam hazeh, this world we live in is the world of the olam ha'asiyah, the world of action, of doing, of discomfort. We believe the world to come is a world of comfort, and we'll get there at some point.
And Shabbos is a tiny.
And Shabbos is
Right.
a glimpse of that, right? It's right. It's me'ena. It's like the world to come. So you get a little taste of that, and we need comfort at times, of course. But that's
Yeah.
people are terrified of discomfort in ways that we didn't used to be. And I'm just thinking out loud what changed, and you alluded to this a little bit, I think, is convenience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like really interested in this idea of convenience. There was an article maybe 5 years ago by a professor named Tim Wu from Columbia, I think. I think Columbia. And he wrote a big piece in the New York Times called The Tyranny of Convenience, where he goes through and saying that our pursuit of convenience is like ruining us.
It is.
And we probably do that to be more comfortable, which makes us more lazy and less inclined to stretch ourselves out. I'm sorry,
No growth.
a lot of lights are going off in my
Yeah.
head.
In theory, the convenience allows us to get more done, but in reality, it doesn't. Usually, I remember sitting here actually in this room years ago. We were on the road by Feldheim, and we're facing the other direction. We were facing that way, and this talk, it's like one of his famous talks that he gives, and he asks, "What's the opposite of pain?" And he explains why it's not comfort. It's pleasure.
Right.
But pleasure is not comfort.
No.
And we so often mix these things up. And I don't know, it's a sad reality because through the work comes the pleasure, but it's, like you said, it's not comfortable. Like we're striving for all the wrong things.
Right.
If we're pursuing comfort.
Yeah, comfort is stuckness. It's like there's comfort and there's like your courage zone is growth. And what you were saying reminded me of, I think it was Rabbi Learfield. It's talking about like the definition of simcha and happiness is not just pleasure, but it's expansion, like it's stretching. And so expansion, though, requires discomfort. Growth requires discomfort. I love the metaphor of like when a seed sprouts, it literally combusts. It's these growing pains. There's no way to grow without that discomfort. I mean, the Torah and Judaism are constantly encouraging us to be uncomfortable and like look at what we've done wrong, how to integrate that. Like there is no growth without discomfort. And I just loved that definition of like simcha, happiness is not about comfort, it's about expansion. It's growth. It's kind of moving into the light, but that comes with discomfort. And our bodies are wired for comfort. So if you think about it again, every single thing we're doing is just to be more comfortable. But that doesn't actually bring satisfaction. Like you don't ever feel fulfilled or a sense of pleasure if there wasn't some pain. Like with the workout example, right? I'm not, 20 pounds is a lot, but like a 5-pound dumbbell is not going to do much, whereas 20 is going to hurt if you're doing several reps. But then there's the stretching, the growth is from that pain. So it's this comes from ACT therapy as well. It's kind of choosing discomfort that's meaningful. Right? Choosing, knowing like pain is going to be a part of life no matter what. So the goal isn't actually to be comfortable. It's actually to get uncomfortable, but in pursuit of things that are meaningful. Right? So for example, if I'm uncomfortable saying something about Israel, it might be uncomfortable, but is that in pursuit of something that's valuable to me? Is that moving me in the direction of the person that I want to be?
It'd be easier to just go along with what everyone's saying. And
yeah, that's
right.
Comfortable.
Genocide, occupation.
Yeah.
You feel more uncomfortable to say what you really think.
Right.
But more meaningful.
Right. So if it's, once we can accept, if pain's going to be part of life anyways, how do we make it meaningful? Right? How do we do things in service of, moving us towards who we want to be? And I'll tell that to clients, like my job is not for you to feel happy and good all the time. It's to encourage you to actually be uncomfortable at times, again, in pursuit of things that are meaningful to you and valuable. Otherwise, you're not going to get to feel those emotions that we really strive for. We just stay in that comfort zone.
Fascinating. Yeah. There's a lot of, I think it makes me to a lot of places, these ideas. I was just talking to someone and just thinking recently since COVID, I've taken a strong interest in personal finance, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I guess I can't say this for sure, but I'm pretty confident the way to really achieve wealth, probably not by doing the most comfortable things, right?
That's what everyone says.
And it's probably like you have to invest. There's risk. It's responsible, of course, but like just keep doing what you're doing is probably not.
And you also have to
the
like
best.
save and not spend.
You save and not spend, and that turns into, but it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And out of that uncomfort can come great wealth you never thought you could achieve. Like I've seen that in our own like experience and everything everyone I've spoken to, everything I've heard. Yeah, it's really interesting. Just going to your 9 to 5 for most people, that's not going to really achieve wealth for most people. When you get a little creative, a little risky, a little edgy, that's where things happen. Obviously, everyone needs to be responsible. But yeah.
But even when it doesn't work out, like it makes me think of the client who was like so afraid of failing a test, like, perfectionism. The most helpful thing that happened was when she did fail a test. And it's like, I failed and it sucked. It was not comfortable. And I survived. Right? Like it wasn't the end. So it's the willingness to take risk, knowing that it could work out. It also couldn't. And even if it doesn't, we're so afraid that we won't be able to tolerate it. But that's exposure therapy in a nutshell, because that's the thing that I use a lot is, it's that you can tolerate distress, you can tolerate uncertainty. And while yes, bad things happen, they don't happen nearly as much as kind of like our comfort mind is trying to tell us they do. And when they do, we can tolerate them. So it's going into it knowing, hopefully this risk will pay off. And if it doesn't, one of the most powerful things I can learn is that I can tolerate that. I can bounce back from that. It doesn't, that's not the end.
Yeah.
One thing that's so neat about talking about these concepts is their truth. They're just universal, basic truths to life. So when you have something that's a truth, it applies in so many areas of life, right? You can apply it in finances and your mental health. Even children, right? They have like legitimate, I'll call the doctor, this hurts, that hurts. It's a growing pain. Like it's a real thing.
It's a real
the
thing.
Teeth hurt when they grow in. Like it's physical, it's spiritual, it's emotional. It's with our stuff and our bodies. It's on every level, the same concept. It's just like woven. It's like God just puts it there in everything to help us to get it.
Yeah. And that's such a huge source of faith for me. It's like you just see these patterns in everything. Like the seed sprouting, the combustion is the growth, the growing pains, they're real. It's the physical pains, the discomfort when we're doing something challenging. It's kind of these parallels and these archetypes in everything. And they're in nature, they're in us. It certainly isn't by chance. I think that, just seeing how it overlaps in all different ways is like such a source of faith for me.
For sure. So going into that more, it's been a very intellectual place so far, this conversation, but I'm also so curious through your work and what you've seen through being a therapist. And you've obviously these ideas like the back of your hand. This is what you work with every day. I'm curious how it impacts your day-to-day life. Like how did you notice a difference in your own growth and how you bring these concepts into your life? And also if they affect your everyday interactions with people, if you see things kind of through a different lens because of your exposure.
It definitely does. I'm very grateful for it though. Like I think, like all of this, for example, exposure therapy, which, I have to practice what I preach. And I'm really proud that I do that. I don't have the choice to not do that. I remember when I started out as a therapist, I'm like, there's no Excel sheet for how this goes. I can prepare for a session as much as I want, and who knows what's going to come through the door, right? So even still now, I'll prepare a little bit for each session, but you never know what's going to come in. And so that tolerating discomfort, like I've had to get really good at that. And like leaning into faith too, that like no matter what, we'll navigate it. My job really at the end of the day is to stay regulated so that, I can mirror that to the person across from me. And there is something very spiritual of like, can I be a conduit for healing? And part of that is not me. Like it really is, it's the spiritual magic that you just have to lean on. Like it just can't all be cognitive and planned. And it comes to tolerating discomfort. I think, yeah, so it's a role where like I learn as much as I give, and like I'm constantly learning and having to expand, and like I think every client is a teacher to me just as much as I hope I can reflect something back. Like we're all mirrors for each other. And so it definitely shows up in relationships. I mean, I think after like a long day, I could definitely be like a little bit scattered. I have a lot to process. And so I have like my rituals of kind of how to kind of close out the energy and like set things aside. I've become terrible at small talk. Like I can do it, but it exhausts me. And I think sometimes, when I can kind of get into my flow, I can kind of get weird stares from people because I just kind of go into the deep quite quickly. So it has shifted relationships, and kind of like knowing that some have limits that maybe I didn't see before, or like really recognizing that like my own boundaries too, even though Eshley, the therapist, and Eshley, who I am, are very overlapped. Like it's me as a person that's coming in the room, also being aware of like the boundaries of how am I showing up in this person's life, and what's my role. But they help. Like even as a therapist, my job isn't to fix; it's to support, and kind of bear witness to someone's experience and support alongside them. And that helps in relationships too. Whenever I notice I'm trying to get into like fix it mode or push growth or kind of get them to a different place, like kind of leaning back and seeing that that's not my role. They overlap a lot. But it impacts relationships. I think it'd be hard, to like know the boundaries of what role am I in this position, and just that I think I'm a little more picky with like friendships and events. Like I love Wednesday night learning because it's just not small talk, but we go into the deep and it's meaningful, and it kind of gives us something to connect around that's not just kind of starting with the more small talky questions. So you have to, I think, be a little bit pickier and really learn like self-care is such a part of the job, and not burning out. Like you really have to take good care of yourself and your energy. And like it's a huge source of Shabbat. I think Shabbat could save the world. Like having a day where you really unplug and turn off and disconnect. Like I don't know what I would do without that, and if I'd be able to do the work without it. So I feel like I kind of answered the question and kind of not, but it all overlaps, and there's a lot of kind of intentionality about preserving energy and caring for my energy well so that I can do what I do.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned, I mean, you're always learning and growing. So you mentioned a lot of people that you've learned and you grow from, but I'm curious, like Esther Perel, who you introduced me to, and any other gems like that that you can share that could be helpful, like selfishly, but for our audience, of your mentors who you think could be helpful for others also.
There's so many. I'm trying to think. Well, Esther Perel is who I aspire to be. I think she's Jewish, and both parents are Holocaust survivors, and she just talks about how growing up in an environment that is kind of cultivated from trauma, like the impact of that. And as a relationship therapist, like she's just brilliant, and one of the most curious people I've ever met. And that's something Judaism offers us, is just to never stop being curious. So I love Esther Perel. I love Michael Singer, who wrote like The Untethered Soul, who's also Jewish, but it taught me so much about like consciousness and witnessing our experience, that it does overlap with some of the stuff in like the Encounters book. Is that Rabbi Kaplan? I think.
Oh, that you were reading the other day.
There's like so much overlap in that. I mean, Rabbi Tversky was like one of my favorite mentors initially, and just kind of blending psychology and Judaism. I have so many people I could name drop here. Those are some big ones. I mean, Joe Dispenza is huge these days. There's so many, but I think those are a few good ones. Yeah.
That sounds great. And what that shows is just so much like your growth mindset.
Yeah.
Which, as a therapist, I think that's so cool, and the humility that comes with it, that you bring that into your patients, and, you know, as you're sharing, constantly growing and helping them, like, that's so valuable and so lost often in today's world too. Yeah.
I mean, you're like that too. I think we both are always retaining information and listening to things. I think like creativity as well, like art. I love poetry. I mean, like Tehillim are such a source of poetry, but like there's so much wisdom and understanding of emotions that comes through more like creative pursuits. So artists, poets, like lyrics, a lot of times that's what helps grow, that I think I've tried to lean into a little bit more when some of the intellectual stuff is feeling a little bit just repetitive, or like it's not really sinking in. It's something, a lot of times it's creativity that like really moves you.
They have that balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything specifically regarding relationships that you would want to, like a message for our J Denver partnership? We do so much to try to help with in matchmaking and dating, coaching along the way of bringing people together and forming these bonds. Do you have a message for anyone going through this challenging dating process? What would you, advice or courage, or, what would you want to share with them?
Preaching to myself here as well. But I think of like a few things. I think first, the law of impermanence. The things are constantly shifting. So I think it's very easy to get discouraged and be like, this is it. This is my life. Like, it's never going to happen. And it's like, where did these thoughts come from? Right? Things are constantly shifting. And I think of, I remember who shared this like parable with me of like, our job is to push the rock. It's like your hishtadlut, right? Like, is to push the rock, not necessarily to move the rock. Like, that's God's job. So our job is to show up. And as long as you're showing up, then it's, putting faith in God that will do the rest. You need to push the rock. You can't expect it to move if you're not pushing it, yet it's not your job to actually have it move. So I think that's important with dating, is like to keep showing up and to be open, knowing that things are constantly changing. And once a mentor said to me, look for someone who is good. You need someone who's good for your soul and not your ego. I think that's been a really helpful shift for me, and kind of moving away from what are some of the things that like my ego might want, that are some of these more like kind of on paper rules or things that have been taught to me. And then what does my soul really need for growth? What's something that's going to really push me and something that will challenge me, and where I feel like I can grow and expand. And they don't always overlap. Sometimes it's really not the things that ego has in the driver's seat. So that's kind of allowed for some openness that's been really helpful to me.
That's neat. One of my rabbis told me once, years ago, you get what you need, not what you want. And I think that's the same message.
Yeah.
Kind of just being able to accept that. But I love how you put it, that your soul and your ego.
Yeah.
Like I just said, like to show up and be open to it. We've been talking a lot about manifesting. And Sarah sent me some podcast. Manifesting, being open to wealth. So I was thinking, I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, I'm in nonprofit. It's kind of like just not so much that, even if I want to be open to it, there's not so much that can happen. Not applicable to me. But then I thought about it, I'm like, that's not the right attitude. Like, there's stuff that can happen. There's opportunities, to figure things out, And I think as people get so fed up and frustrated with dating that they could probably just not be open to it, without even realizing.
And even like physically showing up.
But if even if they show up, but if you show up and you're open to anything, like cool things can happen. Like I'm really believing it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I don't know if it was one of the Ayelet podcasts.
It was actually the School of Greatness.
Okay.
Something about, didn't use the word manifesting, but wealth, the mindset of wealth and abundance.
He's been doing a lot of wealth stuff lately.
Yeah.
That's why I like it. Yeah.
She talks about like a lot of times we're also not specific and like, why do you want that wealth? So it's like, not just I want to be wealthy, but like what amount, and not just like what's the dollar amount, but what would that allow for? How would you feel when you had that? What would you do with it? And when you really get specific, I think I say with friends a lot, they're like, well, I want a husband. Like, why? What do you want? I don't know. Like, it's really like there's not this intentionality and like specifically, what is it that you're trying to bring in your life? And if we don't know that, like, how could we find it or really have a sense of direction? So I appreciate that the manifestation where it kind of pushes you to do that. And really like, how would you feel when you had this? What will that allow for to make you really kind of like think about it and even like motivate, where am I going to look for this? So that, yes, bitachon is part of it. Like part of it is not in our control, yet you still have to do the showing up and get specific about like, why am I doing this and what am I looking for? And it's not just like some person. It's really getting more clear on like, what would that do for us and how would that make us feel?
Vividly picture it and imagine it and like live it, and then it's not so far out. Like it can actually be around the corner.
Yeah.
I love that.
Bring it to mind. And then you're also more inspired for it in action too, right? So it's not just this like, oh yeah, things would be easier if I had more wealth.
Right.
Well, what would that really provide for?
Right.
That builds the motivation too.
It's so fun for me having this conversation with Eshley and getting to share this with you too and with our listeners, because I always walk away so inspired and enthused from this. Just one final question is,
was this, I remember we're talking, we're like, what's our signature? Because every good podcast has like the question, the sign-off question, like at the end. So I think we figured it out, right? Is this it?
So listeners, please give us feedback what you think about this question. And I think we have touched upon this and talked about it, but I think it's even helpful as a takeaway, like a summary, one line. If you're going to remember one thing from this, what wisdom do you think everyone should know, or most people could benefit from internalizing?
Such a great one. I think, it's that two seemingly opposing things can coexist. And so when we get stuck in that, like there's the good and the bad, it's seeing like the answer is always somewhere in the middle. It's like, what's the integration? It's like, how do we know how does the bad kind of enlighten us on what is good, and how does the good inform us about the bad, and really looking in that integration in things, and that the answer, I believe that the answer is always in the middle. So when we get so stuck in like, I'm right or you're right, or you're wrong, whatever it is, that kind of keeps us in this dichotomy, can you bring in some curiosity and see the blend, and that it doesn't have to just be one thing. I think when we do that, it opens up to a lot of expansion. We don't just get so stuck being rooted on one side or the other. And that's where the growth is.
If we're having some like intense argument about politics, maybe there's room for my perspective and your perspective.
They both exist. Two people in the same situation, exact same situation, have two different experiences. So it doesn't have to be, well, no, my experience is right and yours is wrong. It's your experience can coexist and mine. And can there be room to validate, at least acknowledge, be curious about your experience without feeling like I have to fight that mine is right? And then what could I actually learn from that? Because that's when we're open. Otherwise, we're just stuck in the, you're right, I'm wrong, and this was my experience. But no, the same situation. I mean, the three of us have been in this conversation together, and we've all had a different experience. So there can be room for all of those. It doesn't have to be just that one thing. And it requires us to kind of let go of uncertainty, and it feels vulnerable, but that's where That's where the growth is.
There's one word that just keeps coming up, and I just have to point it out. And you mentioned Rabbi Bernath, and we'll talk about that again in a minute. But curiosity and how important that is really to approach anything in life with curiosity.
It's my number one value. So I'm biased, but I mean Judaism offered me that. So I think I'm grateful that we have come from a religion that's so rooted in curiosity and asking questions, and never kind of just stopping, but always staying open to like, but what if this, what might we not be looking at here? Yeah.
We'll have to do an episode at some point about like marriage. There's something I've been reading a lot about is like as marriages progress into years and years and years, like the passion and the excitement goes down. But the Gottmans write a lot about staying curious. Day and night, be curious. We're changing. Be curious, curious.
I love
Gotta
that.
stay curious.
So
John and Julie, I add them to the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last time Rabbi Bernath came to town, Ashley and I were sitting listening to him on Shabbos morning, and he shared this with us from the Gottman. That like, what's the number one thing that keeps relationships going is that, and actually just in the new Matchmaker podcast, which was released today, he asked Eliza Ben Shalom. Also, they talk about what are the 3 things in relationships, and I'll let you listen to it for yourselves, for everyone. But she mentioned some things, and he fights back with it and says, no, like curiosity. And it's just that curiosity in our lives, I think, that allows us to connect to ourselves, like you said, to just like accept ourselves, and in every kind of relationship, that coexistence and appreciation. Yeah.
I often say like judgment, that would be maybe the tying thing, but like curiosity is the antithesis of judgment. Yeah. So like think of like judgment is God's job. It's not our job, but you can't be curious and judge something at the same time. When you judge something, you're closing yourself off to curiosity. So instead of judgments, like I know everything there is to know about this and it's a sealed deal, it's the curiosity is like, can I stay here and allow this to unfold and sit with the discomfort around what's coming up, but see what might unfold here without being so stuck in a judgmental place. And that is what allows us to connect and find, that the people that we think are the most different from us, there are similarities. Like there's a lot of things that just at the end of the day make us human and much more similar than we are different. I really do believe that.
Beautiful. Great message. It's hard to end this conversation. Thank you so much
Thank you for having me. It's a joy.
And
if anyone has any further questions for Ashley, please send them in, and we're happy to have her back on, and we can address whatever else you want to hear about.
And please join us for the Matchmaker, Rabbi Yisrael Bernath, who's joining us next week for a beautiful Shabbos and speed dating. So join us for that if you're local, and subscribe to this podcast. Click like, share with friends. Thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us.
Thanks.
And we'll see you all next time. Stay curious.
Thanks. Stay curious. Love that.